This computer. Hey there, welcome to GitLab Design Talks. My name is Nick Post and I'm here with Vitika. Maybe you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'm Vitika and I am a product designer for the pipeline execution team, which was previously known as the CI team. And so I am not very new to GitLab anymore. I mean, I finished a year here. And it was a very interesting journey for me because I kind of traveled on the spectrum of, oh my God, is my work accessible to the other end where, oh my God, did I forget to make it accessible? So yeah, I'm still exploring and it's pretty enjoyable here.
Yeah, so a year at GitLab. So obviously a lot of our culture is driven by our values like collaboration, results, transparency, all that sort of stuff. And today we're going to be talking about transparency as a value in particular. So maybe you can tell me about your experience of what that value of transparency has been like since joining GitLab.
Sure. I mean, as far as I could recall, the first time I was introduced to this value was through a solution validation exercise that I was supposed to do in the very early days of my, like when I joined GitLab. And one thing that was very different about that whole approach was that it was kickstarted on a public issue. So there was a link that was provided to users because it was like a very new release, a newly released feature. So users used to come directly to that issue, write their feedback. And it was kind of strange because in my previous experience, I mean, companies usually, they tend to hide because the first few set of feedback, it's not very pretty to show to the whole world. But there it was. And how it folded from there was, it really kind of exemplified transparency because we didn't just like listen to all of the participants in the issue. We also kind of shared with them our plans, like how we are going to tackle the things that they pointed out. And from there, we also kind of recruited users for user interviews. So we reached out to those participants if they wanted to share more about their experience because most comments, they were kind of more reactive. So we just wanted to dig deeper into what was happening. And this whole, this whole process of the research, it was, I wasn't very familiar with conducting research this way. And the results were very effective and the insights that we received, they were amazing. Yeah, so that's how I was introduced to it.
Yeah, it's definitely a surprise for me as well. I think like the idea of having this low level of shame of releasing stuff early and often and like having the confidence just to like put stuff out there when it's incomplete and people are gonna potentially tear it apart is terrifying to start out with, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah. So it definitely takes some spirit, experience, and courage to work up to it. But I think it's definitely a useful thing, and then you get the benefit of like almost designing with an audience.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's very different, and that was, I would say, that was the gateway for me. Like, I enjoyed that experience so much that I tried to force myself into doing that more from there on. So another example that I can give is there was a feature, there is a feature, a premium feature in GitLab, which we call merge trains. So when I started to work on merge trains, I usually used to take up issues which were mostly about like changing the message that you present to users or maybe changing small little things on the UI that kind of is associated with merge train. But overall, the feature was more like a black hole to me. And I remember asking so many questions to everyone around me, the whole development team, that I don't know what they were thinking about me at that point. But it kind of opened a Pandora's box because we figured that each one of us, we had a different level of understanding about this feature. So what I went ahead and did was I thought, okay, this is a very scary experience for me, but let's make it more scarier by writing a blog post about it. And I started a merge request and I started off writing just anything that, I mean, I without giving it much thought, I just put whatever I knew about the feature at that point, and like how it functions, what goes on behind the scene, and how it is architectured. And then I invited the whole team to review my merge request, and I think there's about 40 commits to it. There were like a huge number of feedback, and I'm pretty sure like maybe every single word was changed by the time it was ready to be merged. But this whole experience of discussing this complex feature with the team and finally arriving at a common understanding, it was an amazing experience. It was, yes, it was full of friction, but the end result was very helpful for all of us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So the output that you actually got from this article and thing that you wrote, super useful because it meant that you can share your knowledge with everyone else. But I imagine the process of actually working through that with your team and trying to resolve a common understanding must have also been really, really useful as well. And that must have been something that you wouldn't have been able to do unless you had shipped a little bit of work to start out with, no matter how incomplete it may seem.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, if I would have taken a regular approach, like I mean, just waiting to learn as I work on small little things, I don't think I would have had like even 10% of the knowledge about that feature that I have today.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, I really love the work that you're doing at the moment. And I really love the content that you put out there as well, because you're working on some really complex features that I don't understand, and I work at GitLab. So I can't imagine what users are going through. So the content that you're putting out and the way that you use design in order to make these concepts accessible is really, really interesting. So I definitely appreciate that. And I think it sort of speaks to using transparency as a value to like cut through the noise and the potential information overload that comes from the amount of content that we push out there. So maybe you could tell me a little bit about why you went about like creating this sort of content, and whether there's any sort of secrets that you can share as to
Okay,
see
yeah,
how else how other people can steal from you.
sure. So the first reason was that I'm a visual learner, and I'm not very good at receiving things which are very technical in nature. I happen to break them down visually in my head, and I mean, I teach myself by making small drawings in my notebook. So one thing that I figured was GitLab, the user base of GitLab, it kind of it is made up of people with different learning abilities. And even though some people are users of very technical features, they are not necessarily technical themselves. I mean, they might also be like struggling with understanding what's happening in there. So what I did was I used the power of illustrations that I do. I took it up a notch. I started making things like prettier and more presentable. And so usually what you see on my blogs, they are the exact representation of how I see them in my head. Like when I read about a feature, when I research more about a feature and try to understand like what's really going on behind the scenes, and what comes in my head is exactly what I put on the paper. And I put them in the blogs as well, because I know the readers of the blogs are mostly going to be people who want certain questions answered about the features and want things to be like simplified. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm teaching them exactly the same way how I learned myself.
That's really cool. Yeah, sorry, I'm having some camera focus issues. I'm just trying to get back into focus. But yeah, being a visual learner, everyone's sort of different, and it's really great. I think it really helps to simplify like a lot of the stuff, and I've definitely learned a lot of things from the way that you've packaged up merge trains and discussed that sort of thing. Yeah, so I wonder like what's next, like what do you think, what's sort of challenging you at the moment around like this topic of transparency, and how do you think that you may go about tackling it?
Yeah, so I mean, this reminded me of something that happened very recently. This was like we were again working on an issue which was related to merge requests and merge trains and all of those things combined. And because I have in fact worked on understanding them all this while, there was an issue which I had worked on like 8 months back, where at a time when my understanding about the subject was not as good. And it was like in development when I came across it again. And then certain things like fell into place in my head, and I figured that, oh my goodness, this is wrong. And it, I again, this is an example of how transparency comes into picture, right? I mean, that was a moment that which where I was again scared to, intervene because things had moved so far along the process. And I mean, pulling things back at that point of time, it would have just meant like disrupting the whole thing. But then it is also important that we kind of express our disagreement at any stage, and make sure that whatever we are kind of rolling out is actually the right solution. So among the team members, we had this discussion once again, and we started from scratch and explained things in a different way to each other this time. And the whole proposal was changed. We are calling it a win. I mean, there are different ways of looking at it. But that would not have been possible if my approach would have been different since the beginning. And this courage that I got, it was mostly through the process that I'd have developed this courage to speak up whenever I feel that I should speak up. And the communication style that has been developed with the team, it like really helps in solving big problems.
Right. So this by leveraging transparency, it's impacted all these other aspects of the team that relate to our other values like collaboration and results and all this sort of stuff. So
Right.
that's great. So final question from me
Uh-huh.
is if so, say someone new is joining GitLab or wants to join GitLab, what piece of advice would you give them around our value of transparency?
One advice that I would like to give them is that never hide your process. It might be messy and not so pretty, but I think that mess speaks a lot more than what your words could. And your process communicates more than your words. So always present that, never hide it.
Yeah, like show your workings and people can sort of see and go along the journey with you. Nice. Great. Really appreciate it, Vitika. And thank you very much and have a good day. See you later.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Yeah.
Okay. Bye-bye.